organisation you go into troubleshoot, you find that there are several things which are consistent in those organisations. One is that there is a clear lack of vision. Or there's maybe a better way to say this, is there's a clear lack of vision which the people have bought into in that organisation. There's a lack of vision that the people feel that they can connect with, that they can drive forwards. There's no real identity in terms of its corporate culture or its identity. It just feels big and boring and lost. And these guys have high staff turnover rates. So you could say that they're the standard issues, and they are the key things which you would look at. And there's a million books on those topics. But I would say one of the things today is keeping pace. So everything changes so quickly in the modern era compared to 30 years ago. So a friend of mine, he's a very wealthy man, built a lot of companies, but very old school, in his 80s now, would run his companies like a colonel would run his army, very command and control, I think is the expression. He doesn't get his head around, I turn up to work, I'm wearing a t-shirt as you can see, I'm wearing shorts, most of the staff are casual. If we turn up at 9 o'clock, great. If we don't, no one cares. I'm not clock watching because the guys here always work more than I pay them for. Not because I ask them to, but just because they love what they do. So he doesn't get that, that he can't keep pace with the modern way of thinking. But conversely, it's hard to keep pace with the rate of change, I think. So I'm in my early 40s. I have kids now approaching teenage years. I know I sound old, but I just can't cope. I just can't get my head around how their belief system works. And so we have young guys come work for us, and they're changing career every 2 to 3 years. Every 18 months there's a new iPhone, there's a new computer, there's a new form of social media, there's a new technology. Customers are very quick to move on because comparison is so much quicker and so much easier. Keeping pace with the sheer life circle, you can understand why now so many people are stressed out. And it's a big deal with medical practice, isn't it, the stress issue. So I would say they've got a big issue keeping pace. And I think that the answer to that, I would say, is simplicity. And big companies have an even bigger problem because they can just throw more money at it, so get more people and more resources thinking it's going to solve their issues, when actually, there are some very big companies that aren't around anymore because they didn't pare things back. They weren't simple. One of the questions you ask is, what do I struggle with? Or here's what I struggle with. So one of my personal values I've called undefault, which is it's not a usual word. It couldn't be, could it really, with that kind of thinking? And the reason it's in there, one of the things I consistently need to do, one of the things, therefore, I struggle with the most, is falling back to this default way of thinking, the standard way of doing things. And so everybody else has got a YouTube page, maybe I need one, or maybe I need a Facebook page. So you fall back into this default way of doing things. That's a big problem. You try and make change, but the gravitational pull of default has this amazing ability to pull you back to the way things were. You don't always need to know the ending. Despite the rhetoric of goal setting, and you have to hear me on this, I set goals, and I believe it and understand the reason why we do that. But oftentimes you come to people and they don't actually know what their goal should be. And it's an interesting one. So I've heard people say to them, the coaches and the goal setting books, then finding a goal should be your goal. And reading things like that makes me want to take the book and smack the author around the head. Because you've not paid any attention to anybody. And so when making tough choices, it's not always about the SMART goal. It's not always about, it being measurable and realistic and time sensitive and achievable and all this sort of nonsense. Actually, sometimes you just need to try things for the sake of trying things and seeing what happens. Having a go and action is always better than sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out what's going to happen. So my personality is very much, somebody worded it this way to me once. They said, if you're on one side of the city and your task is to get to the other side of the city, you're the kind of guy that will get in the car, start driving and figure out the route along the way. Doesn't matter if the lights are red or green, let's just go, let's see what happens, enjoy the journey, look at a few sights on the way. But there are personalities out there whereby they will want to sit in the car, they want to plot the route, they want to know exactly which way to go, the most efficient, the quickest, the most sightseeing route, whatever it is. I struggle with that way of thinking because I see it as inaction. It's just how they are. And I think the problem with goal setting is actually, from my experiences, it's connected a lot with inaction. So people write down their goals, spend all their energy trying to figure out what they should be and write them down to never actually doing anything. And so there's a well-known expression, there's a well-known question, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer was always one spoon at a time. You just worry about the next spoon in front of you. And sometimes when it comes to leaders and organisations and things that I've learnt, actually you just have a go, see what happens. Some of the best magic that occurs come out of when you go, all right then. That's how I ended up with the companies that I've got. I wish I could tell you that it was designed, that I wrote goals down, that it was very planned and premeditated, but it wasn't. It was just a series of events and opportunities, and we just went, there's an opportunity, let's try that. And that is very much my philosophy. In all these big decisions, I realised a few years ago I never needed to actually know what the ending was. I just needed to be convinced. Let's have a go. And I'm okay with failure. I'm okay with them not working. For me, the enjoyment is in the trying. It's not in the, it's in the journey, isn't it? What's it John Maxwell says, the success is a journey, not a destination. If fear is stopping me from doing something, I have to understand what it is I'm afraid of. And when you drill down the answer to that question, there's generally no real substance. It's just an overwhelming feeling at some point. Usually where you're afraid is where there's great opportunities. So some of the things I like to do with people, myself, have this little sort of, I don't know how to describe it, almost like a grid that I sort of work around in the way that I think. If you have a bunch of opportunities in front of you, there's low-hanging fruit, there's high-hanging fruit, and then there's the thing that everybody goes for because it's a common denominator. Everybody is now selling vintage clothing on eBay. It's just the way it is. What do you want to do? I'm going to go to the charity shop to buy all clothes for 50p and then I'm going to sell it for 20 quid on eBay. Everybody's now doing that. It's the same. So the competition there is very, very fierce. So the opportunities to try and have a go at are always where I think the competition is not as fierce. And that's usually where I feel slightly nervous, where there's a slight issue of fear, because it's not the standard way of doing things. And we come back to this idea of undefault. What is the opposite way of doing this? I think fear is good. I think being afraid is good. If you can actually sit back, and I always tell people to journal. Journal is brilliant. It's much better than counselling. You save yourself millions on therapists if you just get a journal. But just journal about it and see what's in there.
Wow.